everyone. Welcome back to the Plantastic Events podcast. My name is Kat with Eventeny, and I'm here with Jesse, one of our influencer partners and an event organizer who's here to talk with us about her experience using technology to streamline her event management process. Take it away.
Thank you so very much for having me here today, Kat. I love having conversations that are intended to help event industry businesses. I've been doing it now for 14 years, and I think that there's a lot of conversation that occurs about how to do our service, but we don't hear a lot of conversations about like how to run our business. So I'm really looking forward to today's conversation.
Great. Well, to kick us off, why don't you give me a little bit of background in our listeners here about how you got started in the event management industry?
Yeah, so I got into event management back in 2010. I always tell people like my story is not a very expected story. I was kind of in an eat, pray, love part of my life, and I wanted to do something that just made me happy. I started to just do like little community gatherings and fundraiser events. The goal was to only do 5 events, and it's crazy to think here we are almost 15 years later. But I just wanted to do something that mattered and something about seeing your end product and people smiling and happy just really warmed my heart. So it kept me going. And I think during this process, what I've had to learn was just evolving, constantly learning, constantly shifting. And then I think too in that journey, I've also had to be clear about who I serve because I know when we hear events, it can be very broad in concept. But I specifically do corporate events for residential communities. And that is super niche. Whenever someone comes to me in another industry, I'm like, I don't do that. So it's helped with moving forward. So through this journey, one of the things I've always just focused on is not allowing myself to get distracted by the shiny objects, but to really get clear about who I serve, the problems that they have, and finding cool options that solve their solutions.
Definitely. Well, for those of you who don't know, Jessie does not just plan amazing events, but she also puts a lot of effort into helping other people, other event organizers streamline their event management process, especially utilizing technology and software solutions. So how did you get into using technology and using external solutions, and what made you decide that you needed to sort of move your processes over?
So, one of the things I always think to people when I say to people, like every part of our life and journey matters. I used to work in corporate America and I had to use a lot of tech for operations because I was actually in the manufacturing industry. So, everything is about having one part communicate to the other part, making sure that there's everything is as seamless as possible in a process that can sometimes not feel as seamless. So when it came to me running my own business and really seeing it as a business, because again, when I first started out, it was just something that I was keeping track of sales and like who I was calling because I do a lot of outreach in my space. I knew to keep track of that because I did that in corporate. So one of the things that has really worked in my experience is because I had previous experience in corporate where I had to do sales, where I had to do lead generation, where all the things that sometimes when I talk to new business owners, they're like, no, I don't want to get rejected. I'm like, okay, but you own a business, it's going to happen. So I had a pretty thick skin because of what I did in the manufacturing space. So once I really got hold of looking at what was out there, because to be very honest, in the event industry, there wasn't, especially back then, there wasn't a lot of options for us. It was really just payment processors. And then I would have to have a different platform for getting contracts signed. And then it was just like all of this tech. And then we do a lot of volume. And the more that you do, then the higher your subscription was. And it was just like, oh my goodness, there has to be something better. And then there were some more platforms that started to come out that I was like, okay, I can use this. So I started teaching other people during the pandemic because some of my vendors, I mean, I have a vendor that's been working with me for like pretty much like 12, 13 years at this point. I don't have a lot of turnover, and usually if it's a turnover, it's because they just weren't a good fit for me because I try to keep a culture of community, even though my vendors all have their own businesses. But if you're selfish, you can't work with me. So, so we have this team member mindset, even though we all have our own independent businesses. So what happened was during the pandemic, some of my vendors are like, Jesse, I've grown so much through our partnership. And I talked to my other, counterparts, and they don't know the things that I know. And they haven't had to think through the things I've had to think through with working with you. And you should start teaching other people. And I was like, really? It's funny. I laugh at people because I'm like, there's some people that just learn a little bit and then now they're magically coaches and like, I'm going to teach you how to run a business, and your business is just teaching people how to run businesses. Like, so you can't ever coach me. I have real costs. I have real experience, so, and then here's someone that had a business at that point, 10 years. And I'm sitting here thinking, can I help people? Like, I'm doubting my ability, even though I've helped my business, grow to a certain level. And that's what really got me into like exploring to support other people. And it wasn't until actually helping other people and teaching about platforms that I realized that it's a pretty big like dumpster fire. Um, like I knew it was bad. Like I joke with people, like they're like, "Where do you come up with some of the ideas on your content?" Because I look and source people, and it's horrific. Um, so I was like, if I can help anyone be able to attract the clients that they want to attract, keep them most importantly, because that's one thing. I know people that have paid event planners, $10,000, $20,000, and they're like, I will never refer someone to them because it was a horrific experience. So I think that by us embracing tech, we can not just get someone to work with us once, but we can really have like this lifelong partner that really loves working with us and sending us referrals too.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And that is one thing about you is you have an amazing track record in event management. Like you just said, 10 plus years, and the event management landscape has, changed so much within the past 10 years. It's almost unrecognizable at this point. And I think you'll agree with me when we see some people kind of falling behind in terms of using technology or struggling to adopt tech solutions that can help them grow their businesses. How did you find a workaround for that? And, what do you do to kind of convince those people that maybe it's not such a bad thing to, have a little help from the tech side?
Well, what I find is sometimes it's just willful ignorance, but then sometimes it's because people haven't had jobs in which they had to do tech. So then they're just not tech savvy. So they're just trying to keep it super simple. And one of the things I tell people, like, if you're not the strongest at it, this is when you pay someone to. You either pay someone to do it for you pay someone to bring them on to do it, or you go the ugly road of not giving up and figuring it out. Because I think that some people will just look at tech and be like, I'm not computer savvy. I'm just not going to do it. They get so overwhelmed, they get flustered. But then what happens is that they're creating this long suffering in their business. Like I'll talk to some people like, you came to me for a reason. However, you keep going back to the old way.
Mhm.
So you pay someone to fix something that you are committed to not working. So when it comes to helping people, one of the things I bring up are some of the pain points that I know that they're having. I'm like, because you can't scale if you're doing everything manually, not in this day and age. Because what happens is like, especially those that are not committed to using a CRM, then it means all day long you're on phone calls. But then you're like, I hate getting phone calls because then people can't afford it. Now they're talking. I see these qualms that people have because they haven't created a process that allows for them to one filter through people, because every customer is not your customer, and that is a-okay. And some people may not be a customer for today, but if you don't have any way to capture their information, then they will not be your customer in the future. So it's embracing and learning that technology isn't your enemy. It can really be your friend if you allow yourself to look at it in a holistic approach. So like I've had it where some people they lean so much on social media. I love social media. However, me becoming social media famous is the least of my concerns, because you can have thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers, but if you don't have anyone's actual contact information, you don't even know that, like, that's to me just wasted territory. Like my business Instagram page probably has like 5,000. I don't even think we're at 5,000 followers right now. And I've had this business, since 2010. So, but we are a big company. So it's like, again, it's not about it's not about just this one part. It's like, how do I get people off of these platforms? How do I engage my clients so that they can know to keep coming to me? I've had it where people leave different corporations and they know how to get back in touch with me. I have had people go to 3 different companies and they still come back because I have a way to keep them connected. And then also too, because the process of working with me was seamless and it wasn't painful, then they knew to keep coming back to me because they knew what some of my competitors were providing as far as a service. So when people are fighting tech, I'm like, just pay, like the money is worth it. Like invest in what you need to invest because especially with CRMs or even when it comes to like bookkeeping software, I've had some people in the event industry, they're like, well, I don't use QuickBooks because it's so expensive. I'm like, so something that helps you, first of all, something that you can write off at the end of the year, that's $40 a month. When you multiply that by 12, that's less than $500 a year that is tax deductible that helps you find more things you can deduct and help you keep track of your mileage so that you have even more to save $500 a
Yeah.
year. Like the math doesn't math.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's all, I mean, QuickBooks, I mean, like my parents own their own business and some of my family members do. And that was, I think, the first thing they bought because the price of paying an accountant versus the price of QuickBooks is quite substantially different. And they're
Yeah.
not accountants, they're not math people. So
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up. And another thing that it kind of reminded me of when you said that at our company at Eventeny, you know, we meet with a lot of event organizers and we meet with so many event organizers that have been burned before by using, you know, a different technology or a different software that either didn't meet their needs because it was the wrong industry and it just wasn't a good fit, or because
Hmm.
they didn't have good onboarding and they weren't really shown how to use the software and they were confused and stressed out. And,
Hmm.
you know, then they come to us and they're like, well, I'm just here, you know, out of obligation. I don't really need the software. They don't work for me. I don't like them. And then we give them a demo and show them really how to use our software and they love it. But
Hmm.
if we didn't take the time, like that couple hours to meet with every customer and really show them exactly how it works and show them all of the things that they can do beyond just like giving them a free trial and letting them figure it out on their own, it's
Yeah.
going to be overwhelming without a doubt. And you know, of course, someone who's super busy, like an event organizer, isn't going to be able to sit down for hours on end and go through everything and figure everything out on their own. The reason they're getting a technology is so that they can make their life easier. And so I feel
Hmm.
like we see a lot who had the opposite experience where they invested in a technology and it made their life harder. So you ever see that in your work? And
Yeah, for sure. And the biggest thing about that is like whenever I see people complain about tech, it's 9 times out of 10 because they don't have clarity in their own structure. Like some of the platforms I see people complain about, I'm like, it's not the platform. It's because sometimes again in our industry, because we're so used to, especially when we first start out, because that's sometimes what happens is that we never transition to efficiency. Like that's the biggest part. So what happens is that even though they're growing, even though they're making more money, they're still doing things as inefficient as they were when they were first starting. So then what happens is then they go to the platform and they're like, da 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 da, and they're not realizing that what you're trying to fit into the system is not good. It's not optimized. It's not going to make sense because it really doesn't make sense because you're stressed. The people that are working with you, they're letting things fall through the cracks, or you're not working with people because there's these breakdowns again. So there's not anything that's really a blueprint. So what happens is then now they're trying to put confusion into a system. You can never, never, never put confusion into any system. And when people are like, let me just pay for the app, but then I'm not going to pay for help. I'm not going to pay for someone to set it up. I'm not going to do all these things and not realize that ultimately you're creating your own lone suffering. Most people that I've ever spoken to, or I see them complain, like never has anyone come to me and I've been amazed by their workflow. Never in 3 years. Never has someone came to me that's been doing it for a long time and I'm like, oh, this makes complete honest sense. Because most of the time it doesn't make sense. And that's why too, that with platforms, it's like having someone that can even talk to you about your strategy. So
Mhm.
that's what, whenever someone comes to me to do some of the systems that I work on, they're more or less like coming to me to say, hey, Jesse, this is what I'm doing. How can I do it better? Because it takes sometimes having an outsider to kind of be like, hey, okay, this is what you can do in this app. Because often what some people want to do is figure out how to make their inefficiency go into the app compared to actually how do I make myself efficient and make it go into the app. And that's where there's that disconnect that occurs.
Yes, 100%. And it really is, technology is a tool. It's not, a fix-all solution. And I love that you brought that up. So when you kind of adopted technology first, we've talked a lot about the benefits, but I want to really bring it down to a micro level so it's tangible for our audience. So let's kind of talk about some of the different ways that you can improve your efficiency through using technology, specifically with artist vendors and exhibitors, and application-based things like volunteers. I'm sure you've seen probably thousands of different systems from like Google
Mhm.
Forms to like probably just like spreadsheets as well. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's important when you have, let's say, vendor, when talking about vendor management, I've even done YouTube videos on it. It's important to understand, like, if you're just using people, it's going to be very hard to keep them coming back. So however you look at vendors, you want to think about how your event's going to be positioned so that you're not just making money, but the people in which you're hiring are going to make money. So being able to make sure you're choosing the right people. Because even when I go to networking events, people will say, hey, I don't know, something that's cool for some people, but it's not something for my industry that people get together to do something. So I'm like, it's not going to be fun. I'm like, I don't want to waste your time. I was like, I can get you an opportunity, but I can't guarantee anyone's going to come
Mhm.
because I care about that person's time, I can be honest with them and not say, hey, I can get you an opportunity. It's going to cost you X amount of money, knowing good heartedly that that is not something that could potentially convert unless someone is fine with two people, which most people are not, because that doesn't hit the number threshold. Like I say, numbers of 10. Every 10 people, five may be curious, and you get one to two that are serious. So if I know it's not going to get them in front of a certain amount of people, I'm not even going to take the opportunity. So with vendor management, you want to think about how are you onboarding these people to find out exactly about their business. So if it's an expo, of course, it's a little bit different, but you still want to have a screening process because you don't want someone putting anything inappropriate on exhibit
Yeah.
and is attached to your page or the host organization's page
Yeah.
because people are guilty by affiliation. So if you're not scanning who you're taking money from because you're just trying to get money, that's going to be a negative impact on everyone involved. So thinking about how are you bringing on your vendors. The second thing is going to be when you're having vendors, doing check-ins. Like I do quarterly check-ins with all my vendors still to this day for the last 14 years, I'm talking to people. What are you focusing on right now? Do you have any cool ideas that you want to launch? What's going on with your business? Where are you leaning it to? Because they may be working on something that's cool. And I'm like, hey, let's see if it can work. Let's put this out there. Let's see if we'll get any bites. Because that too is how you create a culture where people are working with you. They
Mhm.
don't feel like they're working for you. So when you have vendors, it might not be too much right now for you to do once a quarter, but at least twice a year or at least once a year, check in with people because then what happens is that if you're doing an expos or you're doing those type of events, wouldn't it be great that you have people that know that you are someone that they want to be aligned with?
Mhm.
That way you can have like a steady set of list of people because again, ultimately you want to have a vendor list. You want it to be that you're not having to always hustle for new vendors and people to work with. You want to have something that's organized in that type of capacity. So that can be in a CRM, that can be in a database, knowing what people's services are, checking in on them, because I've heard it where some people aren't even aware that certain people have gone out of business.
Mhm.
So you pitch something that now you have to find someone else to execute because you didn't know about that vendor. So taking the time for that, as well as volunteers, thinking about how do you help people feel appreciated at that moment? Is it like work hard because you're free? Or is it going to be like, do I do branded t-shirts? How do I keep track of that kind of stuff? Who are the people that showed up? who are some of the top volunteers? What are some things I can do maybe once a year to show volunteer appreciation for some of the main people that we remember?
Mhm.
Like keeping track of that data is super important. And then even with clients, it's important to use databases that do email marketing. Or you can use a platform like Zapier. I know there's debates on how you say it, but have an integration into an email marketing.
Mhm.
So then that way you're nurturing people. Like I know every quarter, I always pull a list of people I worked with the year before, regardless if they worked with me or not. And then I do intentional emails to them. So then that way I'm staying in their forefront. So like even if you're building an email list of attendees, what can you do? Like I think sometimes when we hear about email marketing, we think of like Target and spamming,
Mhm. Yeah.
like New York and Company and spamming. Like you're
Mhm.
not those companies. Like and they're just doing it so that you stay in their forefront of their mind, not because they're expecting you to read the email. Like I don't know if I've ever really read a Target
Yeah, like a
email.
Saks Fifth Avenue email. I get them
Yeah, I
though.
mean, I haven't unsubscribed, but I'm not reading them. But we need, for certain size businesses, we need people to read our emails. So this is where we figure out what is going to be that consistency so that people that are in my local community, they know what's going on. Am I doing recaps to people that registered? Like it's always thinking from a holistic way. If I have vendors, how am I keeping track of them? How am I keeping them updated? How am I keeping them engaged? How am I featuring them? So that again, it can't be just a take. I think it's super important for us when we're thinking about tech. How do I create a space where it's a give take kind of nurturing kind of relationship? And the thing is that when you figure out the process, because some of you might be hearing like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of stuff. Here's the thing, this is why you figure out a process and you just rinse and repeat it every single time. It's not reinventing the wheel every time. It's coming up with when I have volunteers, this is what I'm going to be doing every year. This is what I'm going to be doing when I have events. I'm going to be doing this amount of communication to people to keep them nurtured. This is the sequence I'm going to be doing so that, again, it makes sense. Because even when it comes to email marketing, I tell people it's not always you selling. Because if you're always selling, just like we said, Target, I don't open up the emails. But if it's talking about, hey, these are some fun events that are going to be coming up in the next couple of months,
Mhm.
they don't only have to be your events. Like it's showing up as a thought leader. And I think that that's something that technology really helps us, especially in this space, is it shows us as professional. And it really puts you up to me like at the upper level echelon because there's so many people that don't. Um, and it just like I think sometimes I hear like, oh, um, it's so much competition. I'm like, no, it's not. Like it legitimately is not. Like anyone that source new vendors, we know that you can reach out to 10, 15 people and you might get like three responses.
Mhm.
Not
Yeah.
because the competition is deep, it's because a lot of people just not doing anything or taking it like seriously as a business.
Yeah, 100%. And I really think that what you mentioned about making sure that you're showing up for people and making sure that you're giving and taking, it can be really difficult and overwhelming for event organizers, especially when they're just starting out, to kind of get all of their ducks in a row and figure out, well, this is what my process is going to be, especially when they're doing everything by themselves. And that's kind of
Mhm,
why Eventeny was created, basically, was because people were using a lot of different softwares to do a lot of different things. And we wanted to create a platform where everything is under this one umbrella. So like
yeah.
taking your example with vendor management, on Eventny, you're creating the application, creating your custom questions, creating, submissions for your photos. And if you want to have like jury scoring, like some art shows do, you're putting that in there. You're creating your contract for your vendors in there. You're approving, rejecting, or waitlisting your vendors right in there. And you can also mass email and mass message your vendors in there. So now you have your process and okay, like my event's coming up in 3 months. I'm going to make the application live, see what comes in. All of the pictures are right here. Everyone's name is right in front of me. I can
Mhm,
approve everybody in bulk. I can reject people in bulk, and I can send them all a message right now. And then I can send them a follow-up in 6 months, within
mhm,
maybe like 30 minutes. And then
yeah.
next year I can just copy over this exact same event, change the year number on the end, and I did like
Mhm,
the work. And that's
yes.
really the recipe for scaling, is when you can create these systems where you're able to um, make your event more efficient and make your processes more efficient, but not in a way that you're making people feel like you're using them or like
Yeah.
not compassionate towards them and their business. Because I think that's where there gets to be a disconnect where people think that efficiency means you have to be more ruthless or be, you know, less involved in your business. But that's not really the case. Efficiency just means finding better ways to do the things you already do while still keeping that good relationship you had when you were smaller. So do you think you could speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, and I don't know where this concept of like tech and automation takes away this personalized approach. Like, because you're technically less personal because when you're not using it, because they're so when people reach out to you when you're really busy, then you're barely talking to them.
Mhm.
But then you can give these extra touches and all this finessing when you're slower instead of having a uniform process. So I know that when I talk to people, they're like, "Oh, like I just don't want it to not feel like actually it." When you think through the process, you can actually think through like what are the things that add value and
Mhm.
then rinse and repeat it. Like one thing I always tell people, like use Google Docs too. So that's how you start with your SOPs. Like it doesn't have to be super fancy. Like what we do in our team is we have a SOP folder. Either myself or my VA, we do Zoom and we record the videos.
Mhm.
And while we're doing X, Y, and Z, and we have a like a Google, is a the Google Word form.
Mhm.
So like Microsoft Word, but in Google. So we just paste our emails or paste our templates. So if you're having, if you know that every type of event, every time you're doing vendor events, these are the questions you need to ask, you can have that. If you're having a certain layout of like, this is what the description will be for X, Y, and Z. So then when you have someone that's working with you, you're not like, oh my gosh, did you see like it? Because I think that's sometimes what gets in the way with people growing is because they expect that the person that they're hiring is going to do things the exact same way compared to creating things that people can easily copy and repeat. So understanding that even if someone can do 50% of the amount of the work that you can do or the quality that you can do it, that's still better than you taking your time out
Mhm.
to micromanage or do it because it still frees up your time.
Mhm.
So you come to think to yourself, how do I, if I have someone that can do things 50% as well as me, how can it actually now be 85,
Mhm.
90%? Because I have the tools there that they can actually just do themselves. And I think it's really important, even when we're solopreneurs, is not only is thinking about like, even though it's me, how do I start tracking things or creating things that makes it easy so that if I have someone that's just helping me an extra 4 hours a week, because people like, I think I need to hire someone. I'm like, okay, if you hire someone, then what they're doing.
Mhm.
Well, okay, well, then that doesn't give you any free time if you don't know what they're doing. Like,
Mhm.
how are they going to do this? Like, and if you hire someone that really, really knows how to do it, it's going to be expensive. So if you're, so are you trying to get someone that can do it at a rate that you can possibly afford? Or are you going to put yourself in a position that you're going to have to hire someone at premium price because you haven't thought through how do I have these certain activities happen? So it doesn't have to be that you are taking away this experience of it being personalized because most people don't know, like personalized is subjective.
Mhm.
I'm not going to know if I go into someone else's web form that it's the exact same form. Like I'm not even going to be honest, this day and age, people are so lazy. They're not even going to check and see. So they don't even know. Like
Mhm.
we're thinking that people know when we're rinsing and repeating things. They don't.
Yeah. And I don't think they really care either, to be honest.
I don't even remember what I wore 2 days ago. So
Mhm.
you know good and well, like if I'm not going to remember someone's anything, like
Mhm.
most people have full plates. So when we're thinking that we're making this thing so personalized, in reality, we're just making it more complex for ourselves to grow.
Yes, 100%. And I think that's a big pushback with mass communication in general, especially we offer mass communication on our platform and people say, well, I want the vendor to feel like I'm emailing them personally, you know. I'm like, they don't care.
They
They don't care
don't.
that you're emailing them personally. They want to know where to park. You know, they don't care
Hmm.
if you sent it from your personal email address or from our server or wherever it came from. They care that the information is on time, clear,
Hmm.
and, you know, that they know where they're supposed to be. And I think that's what's most important, much more important than, you know, sending something from your personal email address.
Because I don't think people understand how much their time is worth.
Mhm.
I don't think that they understand that because the longer it takes you to do things, it takes you away from doing other things that you can bring in new income.
Mhm.
So if it's taking you so long to produce just one event, how do you even handle a 10% increase?
Mhm.
Like most people aren't thinking through in their event business. Like everyone wants to make more money, but how do you do that if you're not efficient and not lose your sanity?
Mhm.
It doesn't exist. That space does not coexist. So if that space does not coexist, efficiency is the key. Like I can't, like for me, with even when I'm doing like proposals to my corporate clients, like if they say, "Hey Jesse, I'm trying to do catering for my holiday party," I am not about to send them 20 different. No, you have three: good, better, and best. You
Mhm.
can choose between these sides, like you have variety in that, but it's not going to be me recreating. I don't want to have to keep resending proposals. Like
Mhm.
every time I have to resend a proposal, that's an hour of my time
Mhm.
that I'm not getting comped for.
Mhm.
So how do I make sure getting paid what I want to get paid, making the money that I want to make without using up all my time that I need to be making more money with?
Yes, 100%. This reminds me a lot of a conversation I just had with one of our clients. We Twin Cities Pride, based out of Minnesota. We just did a speaking session with them with one of our conference partners, and they were talking about how specifically their map, because this is a huge festival and they have a huge map, because I think it's like a crazy amount of acres that this Pride Festival is on. And they were talking about how before they used Eventeny, they had to have 5 paid interns creating and updating this map. And now it's all done by volunteers because they're able to just rinse and repeat. And they have a process that really
Hmm.
anybody can do, you know, if they take 15 minutes to sit down and learn how to, you know, use the software. And now that's 5 interns that you're not paying anymore. And that's money that can go towards, you know, another event or putting up
Yeah.
on more vendors, or, you know, just opens up so many doors for you. And, you know, we always like to say here that Eventney is like the cheapest intern that you can get because you're paying them $3,000 a year. And
Yeah.
when you look at it that way, it's, you know, it can really make a lot more sense, and you don't have to deal with the human error side of it.
Yes.
Is nice as well.
That's the biggest thing that I talk to people about is like I am not above error.
Mhm.
Actually, I expect it. So
No one is.
I'm like, so let me use technology to remove the human
Mhm.
interaction of it because everyone isn't going to, because something simple as copying and pasting,
Mhm.
especially when you need to send out a bunch, you can accidentally copy the wrong, like especially if you have two events going at the same time, you can think that you copied the right email at the
Mhm.
correct address, but what has happened is that you haven't replaced the other address with the correct one. So here you are pasting.
I know too well.
And it's like, no, like I will make mistakes. Like I even have within my event business a step that says vendors booked. Why? Because it's been times I thought a vendor was booked and it wasn't. So I don't even mark it off until I know because I know myself. Like if we don't think about the micro things that we're doing, because again, when we hire someone, they won't know to double check those things.
Mhm.
And you have to put these fail safes in your business, and technology is what helps you. Because if not, you're going to have this long checklist. You're going to be stressed out. You're going to be tired, and it's not going to be fun. Like if you're going to go through the grind of growing your business, you want to at least enjoy it. And it's not enjoyable when you're like anxious. Like I've worked with people that when we thought through their strategy and how they're doing their CRM system, they were in tears, like legitimately. Like this one girl, she was like, I can just feel the stress relieving off of me because and she is a wedding planner, so it's a different industry, but it's just, there's so many pieces that are involved in it. And then the thing about it is, on top of that, we are dealing with life. And life is just life. So it's like I'm managing all the traumas that are going on in regular life and then still trying to keep a business together, an event business at that.
Yeah.
So it can be exhausting. So it's like, how do I still allow a space for myself to still be human,
Mhm.
have things still grow, still scale, and then give my all of my stakeholders a great experience at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that that's so true, and that's something that a lot of people don't consider, especially when they're, starting an event planning business for the first time, or maybe they're taking over an event from somewhere else, is, your time is so valuable, and the more successful you get, your time only becomes more valuable. And you can always make more money, but you can't get, your time back if you're spending time, especially when you're not compensated, doing things that could be done by some sort of technology or software solution. So I'm really glad you brought that up. I want to switch gears for just a second and ask about your personal experience in the event management scape. What kind of challenges have you faced either with using technology or before you were using it? And how did you kind of circumvent that?
I think every time with using tech or switching to platforms, there's always going to be a learning curve. I think the biggest thing was just giving myself grace, like learning through the process. Now I do setups for different companies, but I didn't start out that way. It took me like, okay, here's what you can do in this platform. How can I do what I need to do better? Like, so I think still being inquisitive is super important when it comes to tech. Some of the challenges that I faced in the past was just even looking. Because, like I said, when I first started, it really was nothing out there. I think I was using Microsoft. Yeah, I was doing invoices on Microsoft. Oh my goodness.
Uh,
Like, so you talking about pain. Like, oh my gosh, it was such a horrible time. Oh my gosh, I remember it's just just typing out invoices. That was horrific. And if anyone is watching this and you're typing out invoices, please stop doing that. Use a platform for that. So it was more in that space. I can't really remember any issues I really truly faced with tech outside of just not learning. Like, I think that that can be the biggest hindrance for some people is that they stop trying to look at what might be out there and seeing if it's worth the investment. Like, I have a platform that I use that helps me with doing some because I do outreach because in the corporate space, I don't wait for my clients to find me. like like I told you in the beginning, I did sales. So I would get a list of these are the companies and Jesse, let's go get their business. So I am not afraid of that realm. So for me, when I know I need to do outreach, so there's a platform that I use that helps me with doing my emails. And it's not necessarily a cheap one, but I'm sitting here thinking what I charge for an hourly rate, that's what that's costing me,
Mhm.
but it's doing it. So I equate my time to the tech that I invest in. And usually what I do is I give myself typically like 3 to 6 months
Mhm.
of implementing that tech. And like if it allows for me or someone on my team to gain their time back, it's always worth it for me.
Mhm.
Like because I know what it costs for me to do things. So yes, I may not have I only spend $15 a month on subscriptions and I know it in my spreadsheet, but do I know the number offhand? No. But I am someone that will invest in tech that gives me my time back. And that is something that's super duper important to me. And that's what I always tell entrepreneurs. Like, it's not just about saving money. It's about your time. And one of the things that we often hear about entrepreneurs is they feel like there's not enough time. So how do you get your time back? Either outsourcing it or investing in things that allow for you to get that time back so that you can do what you need to do.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that because that was actually the next thing I was going to ask you about is calculating the return on investment and trying to figure out what solution is right for you and how much can you afford to spend on, help from either, employees or help from the technological standpoint. And I think for people who are beginning the process, it can be really daunting to think about, oh, am I going to spend all this money and nothing's going to happen? How am I
Mhm.
going to be able to make sure that I recoup this money? And I love what you mentioned that you give it, 3 to 6 months to try it out because it does sometimes take that long to really see the value from utilizing a platform. And I think when you drop before that and you say, it's been 4 weeks or something, you're like, well, I don't like this. I'm just done with this. You just wasted your money, for that
Mhm.
and you didn't even really give it a shot. You don't know, it could have, really helped. But I can understand also the other side, how when you're starting out, it can be a little daunting to think about, am I going to take this big jump? And so how would you recommend for like younger event organizers to navigate that with themselves and come to a decision, about what's best for their business?
So one of the books I recommend to everyone to read is Profit First. It's a really, really great book to understand like business finance, and how to make sure that you're putting a certain amount of money into your business and things of that nature. So I do recommend that to people. In the beginning, it might be looking at 1 to 2 apps that can help you save time. Like I think it's important to know how much you're charging.
Mhm.
One, because I find that when I'm in some of these event planning groups and pages on Facebook and I see what people are putting out there, I'm like, oh, you undercharge for that. So I think it's making sure you're charging accordingly, but also understand in the beginning, like they say, it takes almost 2 years for a business to even see a profit.
Mhm.
Like there are going to be some months where, and as you're in your business, you'll get to understand like what are the ebbs and flows. Like I know inside of my event business, typically 75% of our revenue comes between September and December. So how do I make my company still go between January through August?
Mhm.
Understanding the ebbs and flows of those costs is very important so that it's not over committing in December because I just think it's just going to go up from here. No, actually, it doesn't. It goes back down and
Yeah.
the momentum picks back up. So
Yeah.
it's understanding whatever industry you're in, what are those cycles so that you understand, like, if I'm committing to something, I'm not committing to something that I won't be able to afford in January because I'm not making as much. So it's not like, even though I say that I invest money into apps, I'll always sit here and think, how can I financially, one, make this make sense? And then two, sometimes I sit here and think like, okay, I might not want to spend X amount of money for this app, but if it saves me this time, now I can use that time to get new clients. So however you're going to, like, make sure you're using that time because even when people get assistants or people on their team, they're like, oh, now I have this free time. Now I'm just going to Netflix. Okay, well, that's not what you getting more free time is for until you get to a certain stage of your business. And if you're not at that stage, you need to be doing some work in that free time
Yeah.
that you have. So I think that's something super important too, is like if you're going to invest in apps, use the time that you're getting back so that you can make that money back. Because if it is an extra $50 or extra $20 for an app or extra $100, okay, now what do I do to bring in that extra $100? What am I going to do with that free time to be able to do that? So I think that to know what you're going to do with your free time is important. Understanding like your how much money your company is making, knowing the seasons that your company has, so that when you're committing to something, it's not something that you'll be struggling to pay when things are slow. And I think too, the important thing to do is understand like what's going to be your strategy to get new clients. I think that a lot of times people start the businesses and this is what I'm going to do. They may have a really great concept, but then they're not figuring out their sales strategy. Like business doesn't just come to anyone. Like business doesn't even just come to me. Like the results of business coming to me today is because of the decisions I made with my business years ago. It's not just because I came up with something. I told you, like, I have 5,000 followers, like, or 4,700 followers. Like, it's not because of just having the company, it's because of what we've done to build the groundwork. So think about what your strategy is going to be if you're investing in apps to figure out how do you have more clients come in so that it justifies. So if that may be that you increase your price a little bit so that you can afford those apps, then just do that. But that's how I would approach it.
Yeah, and that was really insightful. So thank you for that. I think it's so important to really talk about not just how to make things easier on yourself, but what are you going to do once that happens? And I'm really glad that you touched on it because you're so right that when you get this free time, it's really about, now how are you capitalizing on what you've gained from making this investment in, this solution or this new employee or whatever it is that you're doing. If you're, just like gonna go on an extra long walk with your dog, that's nice, but it's not going to make you more money so that you can, scale more in the future. And so I'm really glad that you brought that up. to kick everything off or wrap everything up, I want to end with talking more small scale about, someone who's maybe just planned their first event and they're really overwhelmed and they're listening to this podcast and they're like, these girls are talking about making systems, how do I make a system? I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a system. And, that was me like 3 years ago. So I can totally get it. And
Yeah.
so where would you say, if you're a young event organizer, you just started, you had a little bit of success, where would you say the place to start is with making systems and getting organized so that you can, continue to scale? Would it be with like ticketing or volunteers, or, where do you start to break things down?
I would say the first part you want to focus on is your onboarding. So, onboarding of whoever your client is, because the biggest thing that people run into is clients. Like, how do I make money? So, what I would then first do is just think about like onboarding. How do I improve that? Is it me going out to net if you're doing vendor events because we're going into the holiday season? And we were talking about before, like, I'm going to do a free resource on like how to do holiday expos and things like that. So, if you are looking to do like these type of local events, what I would recommend you do is start going to networking events or just openly talking about this is what I'm doing, putting out posts on your social platform saying I'm trying to connect with different businesses because I have this idea. Like talk about it ad nauseum, like and talk to people in person because I think so many people just only talk to people on social and then be around people all the time and then no one knows that you even have this idea. So start to think about how do I bring on vendors? How do I start curating? I call myself a people collector.
Mhm.
I may not have an opportunity for you today, but when I do have an opportunity, I don't have to look outside my box because I already have people of different types of activities and businesses in my vendor box. So I think when someone's first new starting out, think about like what is that one area that you want to start to focus on and start to think about what is going to be my strategy for finding vendors. What's going to be my strategy for bringing on new clients? And again, rinse and repeat it. Another great book that I would recommend, 12 week year plan.
Ooh, I love
Because
that one. I've read that one.
it's a really great one because it's focusing again on consistency in the
Mhm.
beginning, not even just for new, because it's funny what you said about the processes, because I know some people that have been in business for a long time and they're like, Jesse, systems and processes sound so fancy. And I'm like, okay, it's not. So so, so the biggest thing to do is just think of things on a small scale. Yes, it'd be great to just have everything all completed, but the thing is, as your business grows, those processes and systems will change. So it's really never an arrival, depending on how your business is scaling and growing and how you develop yourself in a niche. So first thing you want to do, think about your onboarding because your onboarding is how you're getting new clients in, how are you getting new vendors in, how are you even getting volunteers? Like think about that because once you think about that, that at least starts to get the influx in because that's the part that sometimes gets is worrisome for people because that's how you're making your money. So
Mhm.
once you start talking to people, you get into networking. I tell people try to go to at least one networking event a month in your area. You
Mhm.
want to be like, I know that we have this global, like I can have clients all over the world and okay, cool. But do the people in your neighborhood know that you exist? Like if they don't,
For
like
real.
like like let's aim there first because
Yeah.
there's a lot of business in your radius but so many people don't think about how do I build up that relationship. So maybe in your area start going to local businesses, start talking to people because believe me there's too many people that are scared to do that what I just said. Some people just had a panic attack by the tip I just gave. So here's the thing, because most people won't do it, that's automatically going to have you stand out,
Mhm.
is automatically going to give you new opportunities. So whatever you are going to be doing as an event organizer, do the things that other people are scared to do. And most people won't put themselves in environments and spaces so that they can get new opportunities.
Yes, 100%. And I love that you mentioned that because, back in my heyday in college, I worked in graphic design and I did freelance marketing for, event managers and other, companies in the Chicago area. And I would go and just like have my portfolio in my hand and like go into these businesses and say like, hey, do you need help with social media? Like, do you need help doing this? And
Mhm.
sometimes they'd be like, no, like get out of here. And be like, fine, bye. But
Yeah.
sometimes people said yes. And then that's how I was able to build up my portfolio. And, I would have never gotten that through, just like emailing people and hoping they respond, you know? So
Hmm.
that's a really important tip that not a whole lot of people talk about. So thank you for that. You know, we're running almost close to the hour, but I want to remind everybody that if, you know, this was a whole lot of information to process, me and Jesse are working on a partnered blog post that's going to be linked in the description here right below, where we lay out everything that we talked about step by step, so you can refer back to it, you know, and take notes. And don't forget to check out Jesse's YouTube, her social media. It's going to all be linked in the description. And thank you so much for joining us. I had such a great time.
No, it's been my absolute pleasure. Like always, like I said, I just want to be able to start having more conversations to see more event professionals have the success they want in their business, not just pretty events, but successful events.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to get this out, and I'm so excited for us to work more together. Jessie just went to one of our partnered events, SBG Hospitality. She's made some content around that. So make sure you check her social links in the description and see what she got up to over in Texas.